All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to Friday Night Fun Night on Kirk's Law Corner. Oh, what a wonderful week of snow and crappy weather, and way worse down south there in Texas. So pray for all you folks there, and of course over on the East Coast as well. Rolling power outages, all that nasty weather is causing some serious problems. Of course, as a former electrician, I understand how this can put a heavy load on the electrical system itself. So in order to save some people from having complete outage or complete meltdown, I'm sure that's what they're doing. But what's really going on? Why are they being hit so hard with their weather? But they are. All right. So let's see. Looking to see here. I want to thank everybody for being here. Well, everybody's still kind of coming in, but want to thank everybody that's given their support here, both the financial side, the love, the likes, the shares, the following, subscriptions over here on YouTube, thumbs up on YouTube. Greatly appreciate that, and the sharing. So if you'd like to help support the channels and everything else that we got going on, if you'd like to send some support over there through the snail mail to the office at 6477 West Fairview Avenue, Suite C, Boise, Idaho 83704, that would be awesome. For the digital side of things, my PayPal is Kirk_Pendergrass at hotmail.com. My Cash App is the $ capital K, capital P, EN71. And then for those of you who want to join up over there on Patreon to get some inside stuff, what's going on, I'm going to talk a little bit about the meeting we had with the Lieutenant Governor yesterday. But so that's part of the reason why I didn't make it there Wednesday night, which I told people I guess it was Monday, that would not be doing that on Wednesday night, just for everything that we had going on, preparing to go have a nice little chat with our Lieutenant Governor. But this next Wednesday will be a regular meeting. I may actually be changing the time so that other people can actually make it. So watch for that notice of change of time. I might bump it up a couple of hours, probably to 5 p.m. Mountain time for Wednesday night. All right. So thank you all for being here. I got some good stuff going on tonight. I'm going to share some history of the constitutions before we get into that. Now, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but with the meeting that we had yesterday, it went quite well. Very cordial, and she was quite impressed with my knowledge on the law. Of course, those of you that have followed me for a while, I know the law like it's up here. I spout this stuff off the top of my head. I don't really need the books anymore. I mean, they're great for going back to and referencing, but key points and stuff like that, I just commit to memory. Read it enough times, I get it committed to memory, and I just spout this stuff off. So again, I give credit to God for that. He's the one that gifted me with the brain to do this. So I give credit to God, and I give credit where it's due, right? And again, want to give credit and thanks out to my team and the members that have helped put a lot of that we gave the lieutenant governor together. And I'm not really prepared to disclose exactly what we gave over there, but there was sufficient amount of paperwork that we gave her that she needed some time to read it, which is completely understandable. But the thing is again, I just rattled this stuff off the top of my head. One time that I went to the Constitution, and that's because I actually wanted her to see the actual words of the Idaho Constitution and not just believe what I'm saying, right? But the thing is with what we did give her should be, one, very enlightening, and what I explained the difference between a natural disaster and quarantine. There is a difference. It's two different subject matter jurisdictions. And I discussed the 10 principles of group decision making out of the Mason's Manual Legislative Procedure, which is the book that we go by here in Idaho. And I used the 2010 because the 2020 edition, they butchered those principles. But see, once we have established principles, you can't change the principles. But here again, this is the bar. Messing with our principles. You got to have subject matter jurisdiction. That's the first fundamental principle. The second one, which is number 9, is there must be no fraud, trickery, scheme, scam, and a fraud going on here that may cause injury to a fellow servant. And this goes back to my 3 minutes of address that I did back on August 24th. And I implored them to do an investigation to verify my claims for treason, that this is unlawful. From its inception is wholly void, because that's what it says in the 9th principle, that if it is involving fraud, that it is void. Imagine that. So, like I explained to her, that basically everything from the first instance of fraud, which is the proclamation by the governor, which would apply to all of them. There was no natural disaster from a volcano or an earthquake, a natural catastrophe. This would fall under health, the communicable disease. That's a quarantine, and the word quarantine literally means 40 days of isolation. So we're talking a maximum of 40 days, and then you cannot quarantine the healthy unless they happen to be in that building with somebody who is sick. And I explained to her that, due process of law must be had, because you cannot deprive life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness without a process that is due. So, and like I explained to her, I get it that, in the instance that we actually have a communicable disease that does actually cause the loss of life in a substantial matter, right? That it affects, when we talk about pandemic, the definition of a pandemic, it has to be something that affects a substantial portion of the population. And I'm not talking about, 200,000 people died with this alleged virus, because we know that they've all been pencil whipping those numbers. Showed the CDC's website numbers And they finally put in there where it shows, oh, well, only 6% of these people actually died from, not with. Those are the key words, and that makes a total difference because the numbers still reflect that people died from congenital heart failure, COPD, and all these other real diseases. And they just labeled them that they died with, not from. So that's a lie. But then let's do some basic math here. How many people do we have population-wise? 320 plus million and growing, right? Even if we counted the 200,000 people that have died with this alleged virus, that still doesn't rise to the level of a pandemic. That is not affecting a substantial portion of the population. And just on the ones that have been tested, right, that claim that they were tested positive, the survival rate is still above 99%, depending on your age bracket, between 99.4 to 99.8% survival rate. So affecting them, these particular people, how? Is it actually causing the loss of life? No. So it does not rise to the level of a pandemic. The numbers don't support the claim. So, period. It's done. This is fraud. And fraud vitiates everything from its inception. This is wholly void from its inception. It's criminal complaint and warrants for their arrest for everyone who is involved, from the governor all the way down, in every single state except for South Dakota. Because, like she was asked, well, why didn't you declare a state of emergency? Her response was, and pay attention to what her response was, because we didn't need the money. So this is all about money. Emoluments violations, embezzlement. They're embezzling millions and billions of dollars, right? In every single state, except for one. South Dakota's doing just fine, right? Never needed the money, but nobody paid attention to that. How could it be a pandemic everywhere, all the way around the world, except for South Dakota? Right. This was about money. And there's some sinister, evil crap behind it, too. Remember Event 201? Okay. So, what are we going to do about it, folks? This is our republic if we can keep it. And I keep telling people, criminal complaint and warrant for their arrest. Okay? So, if you don't want to do the federal court forms, AO91, criminal complaint, and Form AO442, you can go through the Attorney General's office on your website for your state. Now, some states, at least one that I looked at, doesn't actually show public corruption complaint, but you can still file a complaint. Now, the one that I helped out there in Ohio is the same as what Idaho showed, public corruption complaint. Now, that's the one that we used out there in Ohio, and those two public servants were arrested 5 days later. So I know that this works. I know that this gets bad actors arrested. So it's just up to us, right? I mean, again, going back to grade school here, we were taught to go tell on the schoolyard bully, whatever, to go tell on him, right? So that's essentially what we're supposed to be doing. Now, I get that it hasn't been this way for a long time, that there's been no accountability. Since the Trump administration and the executive order from March 13th reorganizing the executive branch, because remember, where does the Attorney General sit? That's the executive branch. Our criminal complaints are supposed to go through the executive branch, then over to the judicial, where they lay the complaint. See how this works? Okay. So they're supposed to prosecute on behalf of the people. And this is precisely the part that I was talking about from the Idaho Constitution, Article 5, where it says for a violation of private rights and private wrongs is civil, and for a public offense, penal law, you got to be in the public. And like I explained to the LT there, look, there's obviously a clear distinction between those in the public and those in the private, according to Article 5 of the Idaho Constitution. And for a public offense, it's criminal. In the private, it's civil. So, with the reorganization of the entire executive branch, a complete audit was done. Remember this, we've talked about this before. This is exactly how E-Clause got created. Chris filed that practitioner's judicial report in the United States Congress, the legislature, where we redress grievances, right? And, so many people keep, well, where's the case number? No, legislature, not judicial. There's no case number when you file in the legislature. So you're not going to be able to go to the judicial branch and look for it. It's not there. It's not where you're going to find it. So, but anywho, where Trump asked for help from the citizenry to report on any issues that we thought that we had, well, that's what Chris did. That's how E-Clause got created, as loss prevention for the government of the United States of America, under the consent of Congress. So, this is what has happened, the reorganization. And part of it that got reorganized as well is the judicial branch. Because if you read, again, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 9, I believe, that Congress can make tribunals, inferior tribunals. Those would be those military tribunals under admiralty jurisdiction, like we're supposed to have, according to Article 3, Section 2, of the Constitution of the United States of America. And basically what Trump did was he came out and he said, hey, we're going back to the rule of law, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States of America, and the Bill of Rights. Start upholding that law. That's the law. Remember, he did that by proclamation, which is the power of the president, by proclamation. So, he instructed them to uphold this stuff. So, I can't remember the exact number. I believe it was like 182 or 186, 87, somewhere in there. Nominated and the Senate appointed these new judges, filling the seats that have been vacant that Obama failed to do. So now we have a whole bunch of new federal judges sitting in there that are, nominated and appointed through the Trump administration, with the instruction to uphold the Declaration of Independence, Constitution of the United States of America, and the Bill of Rights. So this is part of the reconstruction of what the Trump administration has done. And make no mistake, it's not going away. It's only going to get better for us and worse for them. It's up to us, right? That power, all political power is inherent in the people. We have the right to alter, reform, or abolish anything at any time we deem it necessary. We also have the power to make arrests. We also have to follow due process of law and go tell on them one way or another. It's either a criminal complaint and warrant for their arrest, or you go through the public corruption complaint. It's still going to end up in the same place. I can tell you that right now. Nonetheless, that's what we have to do. And no, Trump isn't over. Trump isn't going away. But he's just one man. This is our republic, people. And again, to quote Edmund Burke, the only thing for evil men to prevail is for good men to do nothing. And this is precisely what needs to be done. Good men need to stand up, follow due process of law, and file the paperwork. The stuff isn't going to fix itself. We actually have to do something. Okay? Right? Sovereignty. Oh my gosh, no sovereign citizen crap. No, that's an attempt to deny or disparage the rights retained by the people. You know, to quote the Idaho Code, Title 74, Ethics in Government, subsection 201, the people of the state of Idaho, in creating the instruments of government that serve them, do not yield their sovereignty to the agency so created. The people are sovereignty. Okay? Citizens are those that are bound by the Constitution. That goes back to the proper definition from the Law of Nations written by Emery Vattel. That's who the citizens are. But see, that's the whole concept behind the 14th Amendment, the fraudulent 14th Amendment. 13th Amendment supposedly, and I'm not talking about the original one, I'm talking about the fake one, the fraudulent one, abolished slavery. And then the 14th Amendment actually enslaves us all. Well, we are all citizens of the United States, subject to admiralty jurisdiction, which Congress, by Congressional Act in 1845, extended admiralty jurisdiction onto the land again. And I'm about to show you the history of this, where they did it again back then. This is a repeat. It's in the first time again. Okay. Okay. So with no further ado, let's jump right into that extending admiralty jurisdiction beyond its ancient limits from their constitutions from 1776 and beyond. Oops, not that one. This one. Now, you'll see on the screen here, this is avalon.law.yale.edu. Again, a great resource that I've been on for, well, since they changed it from the previous. I thought it was like Lexington or I can't remember what. There was another website that I was using, and then all of a sudden, all my links that I had saved, it kept coming up with 404 file not found. I'm like, oh man, they wiped it. Well, what I found out is, I believe, like Avalon basically bought the contract to put out the history of law. So there's basically only one place you can get this from, and that's from Avalon right now. But, you know, again, I'll show this again. Here's the Constitution of Virginia, June 29, 1776. And they don't want to show that particular document. But they'll show the rest of them. Why not? Why not the one for Virginia? Because this is a key document. We know it. I'm going to start with this one because this is my favorite one. Well, at least so far that I've found. But also reading the Pennsylvania one from 1776 is great too. And I'm going to cover that one and a couple others here. But Constitution, South Carolina, March 26, 1776. Wait a minute. I thought we didn't have any constitutions back then. Yes, we did. Yes, we most certainly did. And here's the evidence of that. Whereas the British Parliament, claiming of late years a right to bind the North American colonies by law, in all cases whatsoever, have enacted statutes for raising a revenue in those colonies and disposing of such revenue as they thought proper, without the consent and against the will of the colonists. Taxation without proper representation and without consent. Void for any effect. And whereas it appearing to them that not being represented in Parliament, such claim was altogether unconstitutional. And if admitted, would at once reduce them from the rank of freemen to a state of the most abject slavery. See, state has to do with the state of being free and equal and having liberty of conscience, not a territorial landmass. The territory of Idaho, or the territory is the country. The state is the state of being. So, instead of being free men, they changed them into a state of slavery. Again, in 1776. That said colonies, therefore, severally what? Remonstrated against the passing. Okay, here again, here's that evidence. A remonstrance is about in the middle of creating a statute, a bill, in the process, them passing it, and then a petition for the repeal. This is after they've made it a law. So remonstrance is during, and a petition is after. And again, a petition is a political lawsuit. This is how we start lawsuits. Title 42, 1983 is a petition for a violation of our rights. Not Title 18, 241, 242. That's criminal. Title 42, 1983 is a civil rights violation lawsuit. So, of those acts, but in vain, and whereas the said claim being persisted in, other unconstitutional, anal, oppressive statutes have been since enacted, which the powers of admiralty courts in the colonies are extended beyond their ancient limits. And jurisdiction is given to such courts in cases similar to those which in Great Britain are trialable by jury. So in other words, when they extend this admiralty jury, you don't have a right to a trial by jury. These CPS courts, these juvenile courts where they say you don't have a right to a trial by jury, these protection order courts where they say you don't have a right to a trial by jury, you're depriving a fundamental right. We have the right to a trial by jury. And it has to be criminal in nature, not civil. And you have to get unanimous consent from all 12 to deprive these fundamental rights. This is what they're talking about back then. Persons are liable to be sent to and tried in Great Britain for an offense created and made capital by one of those statutes, them bills of attainder, bills of pains and penalties. This is why they prohibited them, those writs of assistance. You've been attainted to pay this bill. Persons are liable to be sent to and tried in Great Britain for an offense created and made capital by one of those statutes, though committed in the colonies. So that's that transporting them beyond their papers, far from their depositories and their books and papers, so they can't effectively defend themselves and quote the law and all that good stuff. Persons are liable to be sent, right? But they were allegedly committed in the colonies. So this is why they put in there, it must be in the locus jurisdiction previously ascertained by law. This is why they wrote that the way they did. Because no, you're not going to transport us away from our friends and family and support and our books and papers so that we can't effectively defend ourselves. The harbor of Boston was blocked up. People indicted for murder, I don't know, in Massachusetts Bay may, at the will of the governor, be sent for trial to any other colony or even in Great Britain. The chartered constitution of the government in that colony is materially altered. That's fundamentally altering our form of government. The English laws and a free government to which the inhabitants of Quebec were entitled by the King's Royal Proclamation are abolished and French laws are restored. The Roman Catholic religion, although before tolerated in free exercise there. What does that say again? The Roman Catholic religion and an absolute government are established in that province, and its limits extended through a vast tract of country so as to border on the free Protestant English settlements with design of using a whole people differing in religious principles from the neighboring colonies and subject to arbitrary power as fit instruments to overthrow and subdue the colonies. And whereas these delegates of all the colonies on this continent. So again, here it is, the Roman Catholic Church. They're trying to get away from there. They want to get away from it. Because it says, although before tolerated and freely exercised there, no, not no more. It was abolished. The King's Royal Proclamation are abolished. Again. But that is over in Quebec. So, was not using old people. And let's see. And whereas the delegates of the colonies on this continent, from Nova Scotia to Georgia, assembled in a general congress at Philadelphia, in the most dutiful manner laid their complaints at the foot of the throne, and humbly implored. Wonder why I used the word implored? That I implore my public servants to do an investigation? Where I got it from. Humbly implore their sovereign that his royal authority and interposition might be used for their relief from the grievances occasioned by those statutes, and assured his majesty that harmony between Great Britain and America, ardently desired by the latter, would be thereby immediately restored, and that the colonists confided in the magnanimity and justice of the king and parliament for redress of the many other grievances under which they labored. And whereas these complaints being only disregarded, statutes still more cruel than those above mentioned have been acted, prohibiting the intercourse of the colonies with each other, restricting their trade, and depriving many thousands of people of their means of subsistence by restraining them from fishing on the American coast. And whereas large fleets and armies having been sent to America in order to enforce the execution of those laws, bringing in them armed bodies of men, and to compel an absolute and implicit submission to the will of a corrupt and despotic administration. And in consequence thereof, hostilities having been commenced in the Massachusetts Bay by the troops under command of General Gage, whereby a number of peaceable, helpless, and unarmed people were wantonly robbed and murdered, and there being just reason to apprehend that like hostilities would be committed in all other colonies. The Boston Tea Party? Hello. The colonists were therefore driven to the necessity of taking up arms to repel force by force and to defend themselves and their properties against lawless invasions and depredations. Nevertheless, the delegates of the said colonies assembled in another Congress at Philadelphia, anxious to procure a reconciliation with Great Britain upon just and constitutional principles, supplicated His Majesty to direct some mode by which the united applications of his faithful colonists might be improved into a happy and permanent reconciliation. So again, they're still trying to reconcile, right? That in the meantime, measures might be taken for preventing the further destruction of their lives, and that such statutes as immediately distressed any of the colonists might be repealed. And whereas, instead of obtaining that justice to which the colonists were and of right entitled, the unnatural civil war into which they were thus precipitated and are involved hath been prosecuted with unremitted violence, and the governors and others bearing the royal commission in the colonies, having broken the most solemn promises and engagements, and violated every obligation of honor, justice, and humanity, have caused the persons of divers good people to be seized and imprisoned, and their properties to be forcibly taken and detained or destroyed without any crime or forfeiture, excited domestic insurrections, domestic violence, proclaimed freedom to servants and slaves. Uh-oh. 1776 proclaimed freedom to servants and slaves. You mean slavery was abolished in 1776? Enticed or stolen them from and armed them against their masters. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Instigated and encouraged the Indian nations to war against the colonies. Dispensed with the law of the land and substituted the law martial in its stead. In other words, they subverted the law of the land and extended admiralty jurisdiction, martial law, instead. They killed many of the colonists, burned several towns, and threatened to burn the rest, and daily endeavor by a conduct which has sullied the British arms and would disgrace even savage nations to effect the ruin and destruction of the colonies. And whereas a statute hath been lately passed, whereby under presence that the said colonies are in open rebellion, all trade and commerce whatsoever with them is prohibited. Isn't this what's going on right now? They shut down how many businesses? People have lost their business. People are committing suicide. They're throwing people in jail that stand up. Now, they've kind of tried to do that to me, but haven't been very successful. I mean, I still have these two, far as I know, these two fraudulently obtained warrants for my arrest, but yet they won't arrest me. Even standing at the sheriff's office 100 feet from the door, from the jail. And I've been down at the Capitol twice now. No arrest. That's me. I have the knowledge. I have the power. I don't think they want to mess with me because they're going to get what's coming to them one way or another. What about burning several towns? You know what Antifa's been doing for over the last year? They've been incited domestic insurrections, domestic violence. This is a repeat of history, folks. Where do you think they're getting it from? How to do this? Right. Now, Kirk, that warrant was issued for a legal person. Well, technically speaking, yes, I am. Kirk's Law Corner LLC. Legal person. That's one of my statuses. Aside from being a creation of God, a man, I have another status. The owner of Kirk's Law Corner LLC. So, prohibiting the commerce and all trade. Nope, you got to shut your businesses down. Sorry. All bars and restaurants, you're under quarantine, you're shut down. We've had a few bars go under here. Now, I'm not real partial to bars anyways. So, what do I care? But the fact is people have the right to do what they want to do. That's the fundamental principle of liberty. So I will call out a wrong when it's a wrong. That's just my integrity. Whether I'm okay with bars or not is irrelevant. The fact is that's a right retained by the people. If they want to enter into that kind of business, they can get a business license and do that. But for these people to exercise some arbitrary power and do an order of quarantine outside the scope and authority of what a quarantine is and who you can actually quarantine and for the length of time is arbitrary, capricious, unlawful, and it's prohibited in our form of government. That power doesn't exist. They've exercised it, haven't they? Well, I'll tell you what, now it's time to start holding them accountable. And they will. Vessels belonging to their inhabitants, trading in to or from and said colonies where the cargoes and effects on board such vessels are made lawful prize. In other words, they seized it. And the masters and crews of such vessels are subjected by force to act on board the king's ships against their country and dearest friends. And all seizures and detention or destruction of the persons and properties of the colonists, which have at any time been made or committed for withstanding or suppressing the said pretended rebellion, in which shall be made in pursuance of the said act, or for the service of the public, are justified, and persons suing for damages in such cases are, on failing in their suits, subjected to payment of very heavy expenses. So they retaliated against them once they were trying to sue them. Now, notice that they're using the word persons. It's legitimate. So people out there that don't comprehend, yes, person exists. Yes, it's about an artificial person, it's a natural person, an artificial person, like Kirk's Law Corner is the artificial. But I'm still a man. I'm the natural person acting as the owner of Kirk's Law Corner LLC. The word person is not a bad thing, except for when they try the corporate Ponzi scheme and put your name in all capital letters like Kirk's Law Corner is on the business license, because it's a fiction. It's shmoo. It's stuff made up. I'll admit Kirk's Law Corner LLC is stuff made up. It's a fiction. But that's how we do business. I become a person. while I'm acting as the owner under Kirk's Law Corner LLC. But when I go off the clock, I'm still retain my status as a man, a creation of God. And in fact, that's how we correct our status. Not any other way. You don't have to actively engage in the fraud to get out of the fraud. Would be just completely blown away with the whole concept of having to actively engage in the fraud to get out of the fraud. So, and whereas large reinforcements of troops and ships have been ordered and are daily expected in America for against vigorous exertions, and whereas in consequences of the plan recommended by the governors, and which seems to have been concerted between them and their ministerial masters to withdraw the usual officers and thereby loosen the bands of government and create anarchy and confusion in the colonies. So, as you can see, a lot of this stuff is going on today. But let's read the articles part so that we can grasp this. And we're going to get this concept here even for today. The verbiage that's here is actually still valid. Okay. But see, the way they wrote things back then, they made it a lot more self-explanatory. What they've done today is they try to trick us, right? By changing the words and the barcode word salad here. And not only that, they shorten it up so that we don't quite fully comprehend what they're saying in our constitutions today. So this is part of why I'm covering what I'm covering this now, is so that we can get a better comprehension when we go and read our state constitutions now. Having this knowledge here and how this is actually written and the verbiage that's here, we can apply it to today. And we can also go back and reference this and cite this as previously ascertained by law. That this Congress, being a full and free representation of the people of this colony, shall henceforth be deemed and called the General Assembly of South Carolina, and as such continue until the 21st day of October next and no longer. That the General Assembly shall, out of their own body, elect by ballot a legislative council to consist of 13 members. Wait a minute. We're creating the government here, aren't we? That the General Assembly and said legislative council shall jointly choose by ballot from among themselves and from the people at large a president and commander-in-chief and a vice president of the colony. Due process of law. This is the law of the land, not statutes. That a member of the General Assembly being chosen and acting as president and commander-in-chief or the vice president or one of the legislative councils shall vacate his seat in the General Assembly and another person shall be elected in his room. And if one of the legislative council is chosen president and commander-in-chief or vice president, he shall lose his seat and another person shall be elected in his stead. That's because you can't hold two emoluments at the same time, fundamentally and principally. There it is. But in plain language, if you take the president, you can't still be over there. You can't hold two seats of government at the same time. That there be privy council where the vice president of the colony shall, of course, remember the president of the privy council. Clyde, that 6 other members be chosen by ballot. 3. See, we're just talking about how this due process of law, how these people come into being. What's the process? Well, we got to do an election by ballot. And how many? The no officer in the Army or Navy in the service of the continent or of his colony shall be eligible. Huh. And a member of the General Assembly or the Legislative Council being chosen of the Privy Council shall not thereby lose his seat in the General Assembly or in the Legislative Council unless he be elected Vice President of the colony, in which case he shall, and another person shall be. They're reiterating it again. They're making it very clear you can't hold two seats in government. The Privy Council, which for to be a quorum, to advise the President and Commander-in-Chief when required, but he shall not be bound to consult them unless in cases after mentioned. So after here is what they're talking about. The qualifications of President, Commander-in-Chief, and Vice President of the colony and members of the Legislative and Privy Council shall be the same as the members of the General Assembly, and on being elected, they shall take an oath of qualification in the General Assembly. More stuff on that. That if a member of the General Assembly or of the Legislative Council shall accept any place of emolument or any commission except in the militia, he shall vacate his seat. And there shall thereupon be a new election. But he shall not be disqualified from serving upon being reelected. Imagine that. They really want to hammer this home that you can't have more than one seat. Wonder why that is. So that corruption can't come in there. That the jurisdiction of the Court of Admiralty be confined to maritime cases. Uh-oh. Imagine that. That all suits and process depending in any court of law or equity may, if either party shall be so inclined, be proceeded in and continued to a final ending without being obliged to commence de novo. And the judges of the courts of law shall cause jury lists to be made and juries to be summoned as near as may be according to the directions of the acts of the General Assembly in such cases provided. They're reiterating that this will be done by a trial by jury. The justices of the peace shall be nominated by the General Assembly and commissioned by the President, Commander-in-Chief during the pleasure, which later we changed to they have to be elected by us. They shall not be entitled to fees except on prosecutions for felony and not acting in the magistracy. They shall not be entitled to the privileges allowed to them by law. But all other judicial officers shall be chosen by ballot. So here they are saying all others are supposed to be elected by the people, jointly by the General Assembly and the Legislative Council. Okay, so elected by them. And except the judges of the Court of Chancery, commissioned by the President, Commander-in-Chief during good behavior, and shall be removed on address of the General Assembly and Legislative Council. Ooh. Now, what is this? That sheriffs qualified as by law, directed, shall be chosen by law. Corporations make policy, bylaws. Shall be chosen in like manner by the General Assembly and Legislative Council and commissioned by the President and Commander-in-Chief for 2 years only. Where does it say police officers? It doesn't. That the commissioners of the Treasury, the Secretary of Register, Men's Conveyances, Attorney General, and Powder Receiver be chosen by the General Assembly and Legislative Council jointly by ballot and commissioned by the President, Commander-in-Chief during good behavior, but shall be removed on address of the General Assembly and Legislative Council. Where we go tell on them. You got a problem with these guys, you go to the legislature. That all field officers in the Army and all captains in the Navy shall be by the General Assembly and Legislative Council chosen jointly by ballot and commissioned by the President, Commander-in-Chief, and that all other officers in the Army and Navy shall be commissioned by the President, Commander-in-Chief. That the President, Commander-in-Chief shall have no power to make war or peace or enter into any final treaty without the consent of the General Assembly and Legislative Council. That if any parish or district shall neglect to elect a member or members on the day of election, or in case any person chosen a member, the General Assembly shall refuse to qualify and take his seat as such, or die or depart, blah, 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 blah. That the resolutions of the Continental Congress, now of force in this colony, shall so continue until altered or revoked by them. Again, right here, prima facie evidence, the only way to create and to alter or revoke is through a Continental Congress, a convention. The resolution of this or any former Congress to this colony and all laws now of force here and not hereby altered shall so continue until altered or repealed by the legislature of this colony, unless where they are temporary, in which case they shall expire at the times respectively limited for their duration. That the executive authority be vested in the President and Commander-in-Chief, limited and restrained as aforesaid. That the President and Commander-in-Chief, the Vice President of the Colony and Privy Council, respectively, shall have the same personal privileges as are allowed by Act of Assembly to the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Privy Council. Let's see. Now, which one was this again? This was the March 26th, right? March 26th. And now we're going to go over the Pennsylvania one because this is pretty good. Actually, it's really good. And then I'm going to take you over to the Virginia one, the other Virginia one. This is Constitution of Pennsylvania, September 28th, 1776. Again, I thought we didn't have any constitutions back then. What a bunch of liars. Whereas all government ought to be instituted and supported for the security and protection of the community as such. So, fundamentally and principally, government is instituted to secure and protect us, the people, the free inhabitants and the people and the citizens, and to enable the individuals who compose it to enjoy their natural rights and the other blessings which the author of existence has bestowed upon man. So instead of saying God, they say author, or the great supreme governor. But all still the same. There's some sort of sovereign power that is above mankind, because it says bestowed upon man. And whenever these great ends of government are not obtained, the people have a right, by common consent, to change it, and take such measures as to them may appear necessary to promote their safety and happiness. And whereas the inhabitants of this commonwealth have in consideration and protection only heretofore acknowledge allegiance to the King of Great Britain, and the said king has not only withdrawn that protection, but commenced and still continues to carry on with unabated vengeance a most cruel and unjust war against them, employing therein not only the troops of Great Britain, but foreign mercenaries and savages and slaves, for the avowed purpose of reducing them to a total and abject submission to the despotic domination of the British Parliament. Huh. Now, what's going on again today? Yep, sure is. With many other acts of tyranny, more fully set forth in the Declaration of Congress. What would that be? The Declaration of Independence, whereby all allegiance and fealty to the said king and his successors are dissolved and at an end. And actually, that would be the Lee's resolution. And all power and authority derived from him ceased in these colonies. And where it is absolutely necessary for the welfare and safety of the inhabitants of said colonies, that they be henceforth free and independent states. Colonies within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania would be states. Yeah, states of being. And that just, permanent, and proper forms of government exist in every part of them, derived from and founded on the authority of the people only. Not from the king, not from a prince, not from a member of the bar. No titles of nobility here. Agreeable to the directions of the Honorable American Congress, not the United States Congress. We, the representatives of the free men of Pennsylvania, in General Convention met for the express purpose of framing such a government, confessing the goodness of the great governor of the universe. See, there we call it the great governor of the universe, who alone knows to what degree of earthly happiness mankind may attain by perfecting the arts of government. So they're creating government. In permitting the people of the state by common consent and without violence, deliberately to form themselves such just rules as they think best for governing their future society, and being fully convinced that it is our indispensable duty to establish such original principles of government as will best promote the general happiness of the people of the state and their posterity, and provide the future improvements without partiality for or prejudice against any particular class, sect, or denomination of men whatever. Imagine that. No partiality for or prejudice against any particular class, sect, or denomination of men whatever, due by virtue of the authority vested in use by our constituents, ordain, declare, and establish. There it is. Law, that which is laid down, ordained, or established. They're doing all three right here. They're laying down the law. That comes next right here. First, Declaration of the Rights of the Inhabitants of the Commonwealth, blah, 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 blah. That's how we declare the law. We lay down the law. So, here we go. The following Declaration of Rights and frame of government to be the Constitution of this Commonwealth. Constitution, remember, is our internal dictates of the mind, our own conscience. Now they're creating this to be the Constitution of the Commonwealth. How the people think government should think. All of those public servants have to think the way the people instruct them to think and discharge the duties of that office, and to remain in force therein forever, unaltered, except in such articles as shall hereinafter on experience be found to require improvement. That's right. They can only be improved upon. They cannot be diminished. And then what they're talking about there, except in such articles as shall hereinafter on experience be found to require improvement. Like, oh, well, your Declaration of Rights doesn't say that. Oh, well, let's make that improvement so that we make it very clear that it does. Because that's what we intended it to mean. And that's what they're saying. Okay? So we still have that right and that power today, in which shall, by the same authority of the people, fairly delegated as this frame of government directs, be amended or improved for the more effectual obtaining and securing the great end and design of all government, design, herein before mentioned. Now, let's get into some nitty gritty here. And again, this verbiage is going to sound familiar, except for this is expounded on, and what they've actually done is diminished what's been said here, contrary what was laid down there that they can't do, but they have on purpose. But when reading means reading here, when we read this stuff, we will find the verbiage that they're using here, again, is already in our today's constitutions. Okay, here we go. That all men are born equally free and independent and have certain natural, inherent, and inalienable rights, among which are the enjoying and defending with arms life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. That's almost exactly the verbiage from the Idaho Constitution. Article 1, Section 1. Inalienable rights of man. See, we recognize man. All men are by nature free and equal and have certain inalienable rights, among which are enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, pursuing happiness, and securing safety. What? That all men are born equally free and independent, have certain natural, inherent, inalienable rights, among which are enjoying, defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and attaining happiness and safety. Hello? Fundamental principle of our law of this nation. This is the law. This is law being declared. We're laying down the law here, not statutes. That all men have a natural and unalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences and understanding. All right, let me show you that. Guarantee of religious liberty. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. But the liberty of conscience hereby secured. Opinions, liberty of conscience. Conscience, own conscience and understanding. According to the dictates, Constitution, the internal dictates of our mind. That's religion. How we think. Not how some dictator thinks we need to think. Like, wear a mask. Kick rocks. Get off my property. This is a natural right. An aggregate of guaranteed rights is my property. You're trespassing on my property. Get off. Don't touch me there, as Chris would say. And that no man ought or of right can be compelled to attend any religious worship or erect or support any place of worship, or maintain any ministry contrary to or against his own free will and consent. Nor can any man who acknowledges, now pay attention here, nor can any man who acknowledges the being of a God be justly deprived or abridged of any civil right as a citizen on account of his religious sentiments or peculiar mode of religious worship, and that no authority can or ought to be vested in or assumed by any power whatever that shall in any case interfere with or in any manner control the right of conscience in the free exercise of religious worship. Hello? The claim and exercise of a right cannot be converted into a crime. Miller versus U.S. But I don't need Miller versus U.S. I'll read it right here from the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776. This is still in full force and effect right here, right now, today in 2021. This is the law. And through succession of law, it cannot be diminished. Period. That the people of this state have the sole, exclusive, and inherent right of governing and regulating the internal police of the same. What? Wait a minute. This is proof positive, prima facie evidence. The word is pronounced policy. In 1776, that's how the word policy was spelt, which means the power is not delegated to the United States Constitution. Where they say policing powers. Where's that at? Oh, well, this is where they say they have policing powers, right? The 10th Amendment helps define the concepts of federal relations between federal and state governments, federal powers. See, to police, to policy, and to regulations such as wage and hour laws, disclosure of personal information and record keeping systems, and laws related to strip mining. That's policy. So when we're talking about policing powers, we're talking about the power to make policy, to regulate, to tax. But see, this is shmew. Because if we read this in the context of what we're talking about here, what they're talking about in 1776, that the people of this state have the sole, exclusive, inherent right of governing and regulating the internal policy of the same. Now, let me show you what it says today in Idaho. It's called political power. Policy. Policy-making power is inherent in the people. All policy-making power is inherent in the people. Government is instituted for their equal protection and benefit. Oh, wait, didn't we just read something like that? And they have the right to alter, reform, or abolish the same whenever they may deem it necessary. And no special privileges or immunities shall ever be granted that may not be altered, revoked, or repealed by the legislature. This is why we have to go to the legislature. Okay. Now, this is today. This is Idaho right now. This is 1776. Now, look at number 4 here, Article 4, that all power being originally inherent in and constantly derived from the people, therefore all officers of government, whether legislative, executive, are their trustees and servants. And at all times accountable to them. At all times, they are accountable to us because they are servants. And we have every right to file a criminal complaint and a warrant for their arrest and have them removed immediately from duty. Except for treason and felony, technically speaking, we can jerk them right out of their seat right there. We have every right to make an arrest because all power is inherent in the people. I know I might be pissing some people off out there, but this is how our form of government is supposed to work. This isn't from servant down to the people. This is from the people down to the servants. And everything that's above the line, notice that these are articles. And I'm going to show you just real quick and I'll come back up. These are articles. 2, 3, Roman numerals. These are articles. Now, when we get to the Constitution part, these are sections. Imagine that. We lay down the law with articles and the law of the land in sections. Uh-oh. And then again, back up here. Obtaining security to remain in force forever, unaltered, except in such articles as shall hereafter on experience be found to require improvement. Now, this is why, okay, this is why our founders, when they did the Bill of Rights, said that they were articles in addition to an amendment. Right there. Articles in addition to an amendment of the Constitution. Because this is how we lay down law, through articles, rights as the law. Does that make sense? So, oops, I got to fix that. Sorry. Now, Article 5. And this is the reason why they changed him to amendments so that they can pick them apart and deprive them, right? When they're not supposed to be. That government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, nation, or community, and not for the particular emolument or advantage of any single man, family, or set of men. I know it says soft, but there's a few typos in here, right? Because they had to rewrite these for us. So it's a typo. Unless, or soft of men. Single man, family, or soft of men. Women, I don't know. No, it's set of men who are a part only of that community. Would that be like members of the bar? Would that be like these district health districts that are not under the Department of Health and Welfare? How about these police officers? Nah. Not for the particular emolument or advantage of any single man, family, or set of men. Them armed bodies of men. Okay. And that the community hath an indubitable, unalienable, and indefeasible right to reform, alter, or abolish government in such manner as shall be by that community judged most conducive to the public weal. That's almost like what the Tennessee Constitution says, the one for today. that those who are employed in the legislative and executive business of the state may be restrained from oppression. The people have a right at such periods as they may think proper to reduce their public officers to a private station and supply the vacancies by certain and regular elections. That's right. We most certainly do have that power. That all elections ought to be free, and that all free men having a sufficient evident common interest with and attachment to the community, like a business license, Kirk's Law Corner LLC, a registered voter, have a right to elect officers or to be elected into office. That every member of society it's a member of society, hath the right to be protected in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property, and therefore is bound to contribute his proportion towards the expense of that protection, and yield his personal service when necessary, or an equivalent thereto. But pay attention here. But no part of a man's property can be justly taken from him or applied to public uses without his own consent or that of his legal representatives. Nor can any man who is conscientiously scrupulous of bearing arms be justly compelled thereto, if he will pay such an equivalent. Nor are the people bound by any laws, but such as they have in like manner assented to for their common good. Remember, these are rights as the law. They cannot be diminished. We're laying down the law here. And so basically that section 8 there is talking about basically we all have the right to keep and bear arms. It was well known back then, right? That we have the right to defend our life, liberty, and property with arms. Been that way since 1606, the first charter of Virginia. But this is Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776. That in all prosecutions for criminal offenses, a man hath a right to be heard by himself and his counsel, not or. And his counsel of his choice. Back to that liberty of conscience. To demand the cause of action and nature of his accusation. Now, wait a minute. That in all prosecution for criminal offenses, we have the right to know the cause of action and the nature of his accusation, whether it's criminal in nature or civil in nature. But this is all under criminal. Doesn't make sense, does it? That's because it's supposed to be one and the same. It's the in nature. It's still a criminal offense when you wreck into your neighbor's fence. It just might be civil in nature. The cause of action is you destroyed my fence and you need to, fix it. You need to pay for that, whatever. But what is the nature? Is it criminal in nature or civil? And did I willfully, with malice, do it? That's the nature. Or was it by accident? That's the actual nature we're talking about. And this is something I've tried to teach people out there, is the fact that we're only supposed to have that one common law court. Where are our common law courts? See the 7th Amendment. Suits at the common law exceeding the value of $20. Hey, you wreck into somebody's fence, that's damages. You got to make the claims for the damages. And you're only entitled to the damages, not to exceed if it's only $700 to fix the fence, that's all you're entitled to. And your labor, right? But that would include labor in this sense. $300 or $400 of material and $300 in labor to fix the fence. That's a total of $700 in damage. That's civil in nature. It's still a criminal offense because you caused damage to somebody's property, destruction, injury, loss, or harm. Oops, wrong mouse. Let's see. To be confronted with the witnesses. So you have the right to face the accuser. That's the demand, the cause, and nature of his accusation, the accuser. And to be confronted with the witnesses to call for evidence in his favor. What we call today denial of exculpatory evidence, a Brady violation, comes from right there. That you have the right to call for evidence that's in your favor. And a speedy trial by an impartial jury of the country, I think it's supposed to be county, without the unanimous consent of which jury he cannot be found guilty. Hello? Unanimous consent. There's no such thing as a hung jury. You either get unanimous consent of all 12 or you lose. And the defendant is acquitted. That's how that works. If you can't convince 12 men that this man wrecked into your fence and caused damage to your fence and that you're entitled to the cause of action and make the claims of $700 to fix the fence, well, then you don't deserve it. Okay, but here it is again. Must have unanimous consent, of which jury he cannot be found guilty. Nor can he be compelled to give evidence against himself. Nor can any man be justly deprived of his liberty except by the laws of the land or the judgment of his peers, a jury. Not from the statutes. This all makes sense, folks? Okay. This might sound familiar too. That the people have a right to hold themselves. The people have a right to hold themselves, their houses, papers, and possessions free from search and seizure. Oh, would that mean like arms? Because that's a possession. It's our property, personal property. Oh, do you have any weapons on you? That's none of your business. You got a search warrant describing the person, place, or thing to be searched and seized here? It's more specifically the place to be searched and what it is you're seizing. Or who. See, this is how they mess with like the Fourth Amendment. Oh, well, it's probable cause, right? But let's read on. And therefore, warrants without oaths or affirmations first made according to a sufficient foundation for them, and whereby any officer or messenger may be commanded or required to search suspected places or to seize any person or persons, his or their property, not particularly described, are contrary to that right and ought not to be granted. Now, remember, American Jurisprudence, Volume 16, Constitutional Law, Section 100. Bills of rights and those merely declaratory of the common law. This is actually what we're talking about here. This is all the common law. We're laying down the common law. This is the common law that is the that's common to all. And notice it says, and contrary to that right. What right? They're referring to the right going clear back to the Magna Carta of 1215 as a natural, unalienable right. Okay. So again, here's another quotable article, the 10th from the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776. And this cannot be diminished, can only be further clarified. But what they did in the Fourth Amendment there, right? But see, again, everybody knew this back then. It was self-evident. That in controversies respecting property and in suits between man and man, the parties have a right to trial by jury, which ought to be held sacred. So that right there shuts down these juvenile protection acts, star chamber cases, all of them. Because isn't our children, technically speaking, our property? Some people will say it's their property, but I'll claim what I assert is that the children, really technically speaking, are not our property. Yes, okay, but really it's the right. Because remember, property is defined as an aggregate of guaranteed rights. So parental rights, which is mother and father, that those rights come from God naturally. Those are natural rights. I mean, fundamentally and principally from the laws of nature, the law of creation. It takes a man and a woman, a man with a womb, to create life. And that's a right. That's our property. So this right here thwarts those malicious designs of men, which is a maxim of law. The malicious designs of men must be thwarted. That right there thwarts all of that. The same thing with these domestic violence protection orders that take away whatever right and your right to keep and bear arms. Oh, you got to turn in your arms to the sheriff because you got a protection order. I don't think so. That's not how we deprive rights. That the people have a right to freedom of speech and of writing and publishing their sentiments. Therefore, the freedom of press ought not be restrained. Hello, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Bunch of twat waffles out there. You're in violation of the law. Your corporate policy is in conflict with the law. You can't censor people. Well, it's our platform. Yes, we can. No, you cannot. That's a policy of your corporation, which your corporate policy cannot come in conflict with our rights. You're acting in interstate and foreign commerce, pal. Zuckerberg and whatever that other guy's name from Twitter. And no, we have the right to freedom of speech and to write and publish our sentiments, how we feel. No man or set of men are entitled to separate emoluments from the community. Period. And they're supposed to be what? Held sacred, and they ought not to be restrained. That the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. Wait a minute. And as standing armies in time of peace are dangerous to liberty, they ought not be kept up, and that the military should be kept under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. The president is the commander in chief of the military, and the governor is the commander in chief of the military in the states. So, the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. You guys can't seem to figure out what the Second Amendment says? Here you go. Ding, 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 ding. Winna, winna, chicken dinner. Right here, that the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state of being free and equal. Because isn't that what the Second Amendment says? Being necessary for the security of a free state. The state of being free and equal, having liberty of conscience here. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's exactly what's being said here. And not to mention that we're not supposed to have standing armies in times of peace. And it has to be the Army, because the Navy can't get their ships on the land. So it has to be the Army, because the commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy. And of course, the Marine Corps is a division of the Navy. And then we got the Air Force, since we developed flying objects. And now Space Force. But come to find out, the Space Force has actually just been a renaming of something that was already in existence, and I can't remember what it was, but I read that the other day. I read it once, so I didn't commit it to memory, but so there we go. That the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. You can't quite figure that out, guys? Now, this is me right here. I've said this how many times? Even to Chris. That we need to return to these fundamental principles of law. Well, here it is. That a frequent reoccurrence to fundamental principles and a firm adherence to justice, moderation, and temperance, industry, and frugality are absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and keep a government free. The people ought, therefore, to pay particular attention to these points in the choice of officers and representatives, and have a right to exact a due and constant regard to them from their legislatures and magistrates in the making and executing such laws as are necessary for the good government of the state. All right. That all men have a natural inherent right to immigrate from one state to another that will receive them. Oh, wait a minute. That will receive them? Or to form a new state in vacant countries, or in such countries as they can purchase, whenever they think that thereby they may promote their own happiness. Ha! The right to travel. That's the right to travel. The right of personal liberty consists in the power of locomotion. So you claim and exercise the right of personal liberty and hop in your choo-choo, vroom, vroom, horse-drawn carriage, as your internal combustion engines are rated in horsepower and pound-feet of torque, and it is your personal property, which you have the right to acquire, possess, and utilize how you see fit, and travel from one city to the next, one county to the next, from one state to the next, from one country to the next, if so be, to promote your own happiness. that the people have a right to assemble together, to consult for their common good, to instruct their representatives, and to apply to the legislature for the redress of grievances. Now pay attention. By address, petition, or remonstrance. It's not a petition of remonstrance. I love you, brother, but clearly there's a difference between a petition and a remonstrance. And you put it out there, you found that part where it says a remonstrance does not have a prayer for relief and a petition does. So a remonstrance is about during the making of a statute, a bill, a resolution, anything that they make, you can remonstrate against it and say, I don't acquiesce to this. And here are the reasons why. Because. Now, after the fact, you find something that's been created. That's a petition, a political lawsuit, a formal written complaint with a prayer for relief. Filed in the legislature, because that's where we establish justice. That's where we alter, reform, or abolish anything at any time we deem it necessary by petition. The address is that for us here in Idaho, 3 minutes of, hey, no, you can't do that. I'm for or against. That's the right to address. Because you can't. The right to address is say, hey, I support this. I support this policy that says that's treason. Right? We can make that. We have every right to make that. So, Constitution of Pennsylvania, what we covered tonight. And actually, this is just the Declaration of Rights. But this is, I mean, there's still all sorts of good stuff in here. But again, right here, that a frequent reoccurrence to fundamental principles and a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, industry, and frugality are absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty. That's just what we did here tonight. We have gone back to these fundamental principles of law, our rights, and read from history, from rights, which, again, through succession of law can't be diminished, only further expounded upon and secured. But see, they wrote it out so people could comprehend it back then. And this is how they pull the wool over our eyes is, oh, and like again, oh, well, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states except for by and through the 14th Amendment. Bull crap. Those are our rights. Long antecedent to creating the frickin' Constitution. And it's a Bill of Rights. So it's just merely declaratory of the common law. It's already the law. Get off my property. All right, folks. Hope we had a little bit of fun tonight. Put the pressure on some people out there and return to some fundamental principles of law. Gaining this knowledge literally will empower us, right? This is the power. Knowing what your rights are. This is the very first thing you have to know. The right to a Republican form of government. What are your rights? Where do they come from? And how to effectively defend them. That's what I've been trying to do for 5.5, almost 6 years now. Started out on Blog Talk Radio for 1.5 years prior to coming on Facebook and YouTube. That's my motto. That's part of my corporate mission statement. What are your rights? Where do they come from? And how to effectively defend them. Now, here's another key part to all this. fix their wagons for you. Because, these jack wagons will say, oh, well, that's Pennsylvania, or that's so-and-so. Really? Full faith and credit shall. That's mandatory. Shall be given in each state. Each to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. And the Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. Now, notice that it says, and the Congress may by general laws. That would be the Congress of the state. Because we're talking about the state. May see, this is addition. General laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. Well, when we're talking about rights, rights are the law. We go back to the 9th Amendment, coupled with this right here. But see, we actually don't even really need this. But this is a public act, isn't it? This is a public act. This is a public act. Okay. But the thing is we're talking about rights here. And if we're going to talk about rights, enumeration in the Constitution. What Constitution? But I thought it doesn't apply to the states. Of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Don't give me this hogwash that the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. The states freaking created it. And not only that, it's our rights. That was in effect an attempt to deny those rights that are enumerated. But we don't really need these things, do we? We go back to the Bible. We should know what our rights are. When we're talking about fundamental rights. Okay. So, hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Friday night fun night. I know I had some fun. I hope certain people were watching, and I know my team, a lot of my team are watching. See how I laid that out? Hint, hint, where we're going with some of this. So need to effectively defend ourselves, you got to have this knowledge. And once you have the knowledge, again, you get that power, right? Because knowledge literally empowers us, but you have to learn how to wield that power. The right to petition, remonstrate, and address. Mark, I love it. I have a bunch of hats, different colors. They all say I'm the boss. Exactly. Unless you're in service to your fellow man under a contract. So, again, with what I'll reiterate for a couple of questions that are out there about what my team and I are doing here in Idaho. We're going to start holding these people accountable. Our due diligence, claiming and exercising our rights, and holding them accountable. That's what you all need to do over in your states. Find people in your area to start working with. Got to make this happen, folks. I can't do this for you. I'm only one man, just like Trump. Can't do it for us. He's done a lot, trust me. But think about it, folks. The power is inherent in the people. They're public servants. Okay? Thank you all for being here. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. And please pray for our U.S. Marshals and the military. There's some I do really think there's something going on over there in D.C. And I got some word this morning that I read from a post. Could be true. Could be what's really going on over there. Maybe something about some underground tunnels. What have we been talking about? Rescuing children from these underground tunnels for how long now? Why is the military got it all fenced off? Why is the military still there? Okay. So if you'd like to help support the channels and our endeavors here, which we could really use the support because things are going to start costing a little more money when we start filing lawsuits and other things. I would greatly appreciate the support, and I already thank you all for those that have given support, especially those over on Patreon. But if you'd like to help through snail mail, those cashier's checks, money orders, postal money orders, regular cashier's check, or the money orders, gold and silver coinage. I know that's shortage right now, but send that through the snail mail over to the office, please, at 6477 West Fairview Avenue, Suite C, Boise, Idaho 83704. Digital side, PayPal, Kirk_Pendergrass at hotmail.com. My Cash App is the $, capital K, capital P, EN71, case sensitive. And let's see, what else? Well, pray for everybody. Everybody is having a hard time out there. And I thank you all for your prayers and your love and support. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. And of course, we will see you back here for Monday Night Law, which I'll go back to the commentaries on the Constitution by Joseph Story for Monday Night Law. That we're going to start going through that and have Mr. Joseph Story there just explain some of the things in the Constitution, what it really means. You may be very enlightened to, I don't know, to hear how it was explained back then, 1833. Anyways, much love, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Good night, everybody.